Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our next SWIWIN turbine testing video. This is the SWIWIN 190 turbine engine, and we are going to open this thing up, take a look at it, weigh it, test run it, do all of our normal checks that we do, and see how this thing compares to some of the recently tested engines that we've done. So hit that subscribe button down below, stay tuned, and we will open this box and test this engine. All right guys, so pretty standard stuff. If you've watched any of the SWIWIN engines before, and tests of the SWIWIN engines that we've done here at the lighter side of RC, this is going to be all pretty normal fare. So that is what the engines look like when they come to you. If you order these engines through the lighter side of RC, when you open this thing up, there'll be a paper copy of the manual in here. The manual is available on our website. And we'll pull all these items out and take a look at what is inside of this engine. And additionally, some good news for the channel. We have our turbine balancer en route and should be here hopefully in the next couple weeks. And we do have our balancer coming. So that is definitely the next step for SWIWIN Turbines Canada and the lighter side of RC in our channel. So big thumbs up to that. Super cool to have that happening. Let's take a look at what's in this box. Okay, so standard SWIWIN turbine setup. The bigger engines, the 170 and above, you'll get two sections of fuel tubing, a 6 mil and a 4 mil. We've got our fuel pump with the double connectors. Our Pisco valve, our fuel filter. Now also when you order these from the lighter side of RC, I generally try to install in the box or provide in the box a fuel filter holder as well too. We've got our data relay module, our GSU unit, and our standard cable setup, and the turbine itself. So in this case, it's a SWIWIN 190 turbine. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we are going to weigh these items, all of the items individually. Now, this engine or these weight measurements should be exactly the same as what we found on the SWIWIN 170. Now, just a little point here for you. If you are thinking about a 170, the 190 and the 170 are exactly the same case size. Physical dimensions are identical. Same thing with the 120 and 140 series. Same thing with the 220 and 240 series. So, you know, if you're thinking about a 170, maybe put a 190 in there. There is slightly more cost to it, but in some cases you just don't need it. Like the Ultra Flash that's up there, my Ultra Flash, it's got a 170 in it. That is already enough engine. I fly that thing around on quarter throttle and it is ballistic. So putting a 190 in there is just not needed. Fun, sort of, but it might not be needed in your situation. So just keep that in mind as well too. Let's weigh these items. All right, so engine itself, of course, it's got the bracket or mount already on there. We've got our FOD screen on there and everything. So engine itself is 1,610 grams. Data relay module, 42 grams. Pisco valve, 13 grams. Fuel pump with the cable on it. Now when I install this, I usually like to have the fuel pump sitting really close to the relay module, so we're just measuring these as complete units, and that's 117 grams. We've got our cable set up here, which is 61 grams. Our fuel filter, which is 4 grams. And our data terminal, which is 50 grams. All right, so that's one of the things I love about these engines is they're not super light, they're not super heavy, they're just kind of middle of the road weight. I love the large compressor on the engine as well too, or the intake. The size of the intake is phenomenal. It basically allows a ton of air to go inside this turbine. Everything's polished. Not that that makes a difference, but it's all polished. It looks really slick. But I like the bigger size compressor. Now, if you haven't watched any of the SWIWIN engine tests before, we've got a brushless starter motor. Now, it's interesting to note that SWIWIN uses an outrunner starter motor on the starter motor and also on the fuel pump as well too. It's got a can covering it, but it's also an outrunner motor. Now, outrunner motors have more torque, more power, which is why they use them compared to an in-runner brushless motor. So little tip for you there. Couple other points of interest on the SWIWIN turbines. The fuel pump on all of their engines is identical. So it's got, everything 300 and down. It's got 4 nipples or intakes on the fuel pump. Now on the smaller size engines, there'll be a midway loop. So you'll have an input, it goes through the loop, and then the output. On the larger engines, you've got 2 inputs being used, 2 outputs being used. Those come to the Y fittings. Your input is a 6mm Festo, your output is a 4mm Festo. Never had a single problem with any of these, I guess they're SMC or maybe Pisco fittings. Never had any problems with these fittings. It's a great way to do it. The fuel pumps are awesome. They work really well. Again, brushless too. All right, so that is basically the nuts and bolts of this engine. What we're going to do now is we're going to throw it on the test stand, get some measurements from it. We're going to go through the normal running procedure of this engine. So what I like to do when I test run these engines, I'm going to initially do my stock changes that I make when we get the engines from SWIWIN. We do some tuning on them, some preemptive tuning before we run them. And then from there, after the runs, we make some small changes as necessary. So what we'll do is we go through this engine test is basically we'll do a startup on the engine, and I'll throw some wording down as we go through this whole procedure. So we'll do the startup on the engine, we'll slowly increase the throttle to max. That allows the fuel pump to learn the range, which is very important, and then we'll bring it back down to idle. Once it's stabilized at idle, we'll do some acceleration tests. So we're going to pop the acceleration or the stick all the way up, and it tells you on the GSU exactly what the acceleration time is. We're aiming for about 4 seconds, and then from there, after we get that set, we'll do a restart test, which happens on all engines. And then from there, we'll check our full throttle fuel consumption on the engine and also our full throttle power output. Now, interesting point to note is the full throttle output that appears in this video is not what you're going to get at sea level at 15 degrees Celsius. So the numbers you see from engine manufacturers, they are at 15 degrees Celsius, which is 50 degrees, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's also at sea level. While we're at 3,200 feet above sea level, it is 28 degrees Celsius outside right now, which means that it's about 90 degrees outside. So our density altitude is probably hovering somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 feet above sea level. So keep that in mind. The number you'll see on our little test scale here is not conducive to what you're going to get in normal flying conditions if you're at lower elevation. So please remember that. That applies to any turbine test we've done, whether it's a Zykoy turbine, SWIWIN turbine, KingTech turbine, and I mention that in every single video. Okay, for our full throttle fuel run test, we put 1 liter of fuel in this container, and what we do is we put the turbine at full throttle, we switch these valves over right here. Now this valve pulls from the fuel tank, this valve pulls from the 1 liter fuel cell. So we'll go throttle up, we'll switch these guys over, and we'll time how long it takes to go through that 1 liter of fuel. Now generally what I like to do is I'll do that full throttle fuel consumption, and then we'll do the restart test right after, because it's kind of a good time to do it, because usually you're inducing bubbles into the system and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, let's get this thing hooked up on the test stand, and then we'll go through our normal testing procedures. All right guys, so we've used our Jersey Modeler jug here, little pump for Jersey Modeler. We have filled up our 1 liter fuel cell here with our fuel, and we're just running the fuel pump right now. I do this with every engine, every brand new engine. I run this for about 10 minutes on every engine. And so right now it's just using the fuel from the fuel tank and just running it in a closed loop scenario. So it's pulling through the normal system and then it's pumping through all the other stuff going back into the tank. So we'll let this run for about 10 minutes and then we will get underway with our test. All right, first startup on the SWIWIN 190. All right, guys, and that is our test. So let's cover some of the basics of what we found. Also, before we do that, just in case you're not aware, Lighter Side of RC is a dealer for SWIWIN turbines and soon to be full service center as well too. So remember that when you're purchasing or thinking about purchasing your next turbine. So fuel consumption on this 190. So we used, now I was a little bit late on starting the timer, and because of that I let it go a couple seconds later, and I feel like we are bang on for that 1 liter of fuel usage. So we used 1 liter of fuel in 1 minute and 55 seconds, which is 115 seconds. That means that we use 8.696 milliliters per second at full throttle times 60. That means in 1 minute at full throttle, we use 522 milliliters of fuel, which is a real good number. I believe the 170 was very, very close to those numbers, if not almost identical. So really impressive numbers on that stuff. I think the max throttle we got out of this turbine during the normal testing was 33 pounds of thrust. The idle thrust was near the end there, about 1.5 pounds of thrust. Now, after we did our restart test and I went back to full throttle, it went up to 36 pounds, but the engine went up to about 118,500 or something like that, and then it brought itself back down. So anyways, keep that in mind. We basically got 33 pounds of thrust out of this engine, but please remember that we are at an extremely high elevation here, and the engine performed exactly what we should have expected to see. So that is it for this awesome engine test, guys. If you are thinking about kind of a 170, 190, 200 size engine, this is definitely a great candidate. Keep that in mind. I have been running SWIWIN turbines now for 2 seasons. Very, very impressed with these engines. All of my aircraft have had SWIWIN turbines. A lot of our local guys here are starting to switch over to the SWIWIN turbine line, and been very impressed with every engine that we have seen. So if you guys do have any questions, don't forget to list them down below. You can also reach out to me by email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com, and my website, thelightersideofrc.com. All of those things are listed down below, and the best way to contact me with any questions is by email. So thanks, guys, for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching the video, and we will see you in the next video.